I was standing with my back turned, tinkering with the old toolbox in the shed, when I heard heavy footsteps coming in behind me. I turned around thinking it was just my son coming to ask for something, but instead I saw two men in suits standing next to him. "Dad, we need to talk," he said, cold, calculated, as if he were speaking to a stranger who deserved to be judged. At that moment, I realized my own son had hired him, private researchers, to prove that I was lying, and I didn't even know what they were accusing me of. Before I continue, subscribe and tell me what time it is where you are right now. I took a deep breath. The shed had the familiar smell of burnt oil, rust, and damp wood, a mixture that had accompanied me for half my life. That was my refuge, my little world. Light streamed through the crack in the door, streaking dust particles across the air as if everything were an old photograph. And in the midst of that silence, my son Ethan kept his arms crossed, as if he had been watching me from a distance for years and I hadn't noticed. My eyes fell on pocket watch of my father, hanging on an old nail in the wall. Weak tick-tock, almost failing. That sound always calmed my heart, and it was always a part of his childhood. I went back in time unintentionally. I remember when Ethan was about 8 years old. He would spend hours sitting on the shed step while I fixed the broken radio in the house. He kicked up dust, asked silly questions, and laughed loudly. One day he pointed to his pocket watch and asked, "Why do you keep that? It doesn't even work properly." I laughed. "It's so we don't forget where we came from, son. Sometimes we need something small to remind us who we are." Back then he believed in me. He saw the world through my eyes. And I never imagined that one day he would see me as a suspect. I returned to the present when the tallest investigator opened a black folder and placed it on my desk. "We've received some complaints, sir. There are indications that you concealed assets, falsified documents, and lied to your own son." My body went cold. "Who's reporting this?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. Ethan looked away. A fraction of a second, but it was enough to hurt like a blade. The scattered papers were full of charts, numbers, non-existent deposits, signatures I didn't remember making. But amidst all of this, there was one thing that caught my attention. My signature with a curve I haven't used in over 20 years. It was fake, as false as the accusation. I blinked slowly, trying to understand where it all began. A week earlier, he had shown up with a simple request. "Dad, can you sign these documents for me? It's just to speed up a process for my new business." He seemed innocent. Routine paperwork, nothing special. But something in his tone, something in his haste, made me uneasy. He said he needed to read it carefully. He insisted. Then he insisted even more. I told him to wait. And then came the pressure. Late night messages, surprise visits, calls in the middle of my workday. "It's important, Dad. Trust me." And the longer I waited, the tighter he squeezed. I thought I was protecting him. I didn't know I was handling the lit fuse of a bomb. Now, facing the investigators, I understood the third stage, the violation. Act of injustice? Complete. They brought photos of documents signed with my name on them. Spreadsheets showing money transfers that I've never seen before. Transactions involving the opening of companies I've never heard of. But everything had the same flaw. Impossible dates, signatures copied. And most importantly, the computer used had been registered in the name of Ethan. When I noticed this, the investigators noticed it too. One of them frowned and asked, "Sir, do you have access to your son's computer?" I shook my head. "No." The researcher looked at the other person, and that's when I realized the story had taken a turn. Ethan noticed it too. He took a step forward, irritated, his voice trembling. "Can't you see? He's faking it. He's always done this. He's always been manipulative." The word he chose cut me to the bone. Manipulator. It came from the boy who held my hand when I was afraid of the dark. The shortest of the investigators cleared his throat. "We'll need to call the police to clarify the situation. It could be a case of forgery." My son opened his mouth to protest, but nothing came out. Nothing. That's when the shock hit me. My son, my own son, he accused me to cover up something he himself did. The police were called, not by me, for them. And it was me whom they came to evaluate. When the officers arrived, they asked if I wanted to give a statement. But before saying anything, I looked at Ethan. He stood in the doorway of the shed, the same sun shining in his eyes as it had when he was a boy. But now, there was no innocence, just coldness. I took a deep breath and asked the question that was burning in my chest. "Son, when did being my son stop being enough?" He didn't answer. He simply turned his face away. That night I sat alone in the shed. The dim light of the hanging lamp trembled as if it were afraid to turn on. I took my father's pocket watch and opened it slowly. The ticking was weaker than ever, almost gone, just like the two of us. The doorbell rang at 6 a.m. A dry, impatient sound, different from the hesitant ringing of the neighbors. When I opened the door, I found two police officers standing on my porch. and behind them my son holding a blue folder as if it were a trophy won at my expense. He didn't even say good morning to me. I simply said, "Dad, this needs to end today." Before I continue, subscribe and tell me what time it is where you are right now. The smell of freshly brewed coffee still lingered in the house. The kettle hissed softly on the stove, filling the kitchen with steam and memories. That was my routine. Waking up early, boiling water, listening to the silence before the world screamed back. A simple, almost sacred ritual. But that morning, the sacred became suspect. The police officers asked to come in, polite but with that rigid demeanor of someone who already expects to find something. Ethan came in too, gripping the blue folder so tightly that his fingers turned white. It was as if he carried within her the final sentence of my life. As they settled in, my gaze fell upon my father's pocket watch, resting on the kitchen table. The slow ticking filled the room, as if trying to organize my thoughts, calm my nerves, prevent me from falling into an abyss. But nothing could hold anything together anymore. I went back in time. I always do. To a simple moment. A moment that now seemed to belong to another life. Ethan was about 10 years old when he discovered that I woke up before the sun. One day he woke up early and found me making coffee. She sat down in the high chair, swinging her short legs. "Why do you wake up so early?" he asked. I smiled. "Because the world only listens to me when it's quiet." He laughed, finding it funny. "And I thought that boy would always listen to me like that." Mistake. Yes, the older police officer gave the innocent request. "Sir, may we see some documents?" I nodded. It seemed simple. At least it should be. But then my son put the blue folder on the table and opened it, scattering papers like someone dropping weapons onto a chessboard. "You're going to confess, Dad. It's time to stop this. Enough with the lies." The words resonated louder than any siren. Each syllable seemed spat out, not spoken, as if he genuinely believed I was a problem in his life. I picked up the first document. My supposed signature was there. Too perfect. The same curvature that I had abandoned years ago, when my wrist began to tremble after the accident at work. The police officer flipped through other pages. "There are financial transactions here under your name, but the dates don't match. There are deposits on days when apparently you were hospitalized. Is that correct?" Absent. Ethan didn't. He crossed his arms, annoyed. "He's faking it. He always does this. He always finds an excuse." The younger police officer raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Ethan, you said your father opened hidden parallel accounts, but it says here that the transfers came from your home address." My heart stopped. I saw his mask crack for the first time. Just for a second, but I saw it. Days before, the beginning of everything. He had shown up with a simple request. "Dad, can you sign these documents? It's just a formality. Nothing serious." I found it strange. He never needed my signature for anything, but he insisted with that anxious haste that had bothered me from the start. "Trust me, Dad. It's for my future." When I asked for time to read, he got annoyed. And the longer I waited, the more he pressured me. Until one day he showed up at the shed and said, "If you don't sign, I'll lose everything. It will be your fault." There, something inside me broke. But even so, I didn't sign, because something even deeper told me that there was a lie at the heart of that request. And now, seeing the fake documents in front of the police officers, I understood. It wasn't all lies. It was a fraud. The violation came in full force when the most experienced police officer held one of the papers up to the light and said, "Whoever did this didn't know that this watermark only exists on recent printings. This couldn't have been printed on the date given." It was like a punch, for him, and for me. Ethan paled, but maintained his composure. "You're falling for his act. He's always manipulated everything. He's good at it." Manipulator. That word always. The word he used to punish me for things he himself did. The police officer took a deep breath, then spoke. "We're going to send everything for analysis. But at the moment, there's enough evidence to suggest that the problem isn't your father." My son recoiled as if he had been shot. The final confrontation that morning happened when he stared at me, his eyes red with frustration, and said, "You ruined everything. You always ruin everything." I held the pocket watch in the palm of my hand. The ticking beat against my wrist like a tired heart, and I replied slowly, almost in a whisper, "Son, when did you start seeing me as your enemy?" He didn't answer. It wasn't even necessary. That silence said it all. After everyone had left, I sat on the porch. The sun was beginning to rise, tinging the backyard fence with a golden light that I always found beautiful. But on that day, nothing shone. I closed my pocket watch. The ticking was weak, almost dying, like our relationship. The third day after the police visit was the quietest day of my life. No cars passed on the dirt road. No neighbors let their dogs off the leash. Even the wind seemed afraid to touch the dry leaves scattered across the yard. I swept slowly, dragging the dust as one drags memories one would rather not disturb. The smell of damp earth still lingered in the air from the previous night's rain. A smell that always reminded me of the time when Ethan ran around the yard barefoot, laughing, stumbling, calling out, "Dad, look at me." It's hard to believe that the same boy was now calling me a liar. Before I continue, subscribe and tell me what time it is where you are right now. I was so engrossed in my thoughts that I barely heard the gate creaking. When I looked up, I saw a figure standing there, one of the private investigators. But this time, no suit, no tie, no rigid posture. He looked tired. It looked human. "Mr. Miller, can we talk?" The way he said my name, softly, cautiously, made me realize that this was not a formal visit. I invited him in. He refused. He preferred to sit on the wooden bench under the tree. That's the one where Ethan and I built the old treehouse years ago. Today, only the sturdy trunk and a few thick branches remained. But for me, it was an altar to our history, an altar now wounded. The innocent request was simple. "Could you bring me a glass of water?" He brought. And when I placed the glass in his hands, I noticed they were trembling. It wasn't fear. It was my fault. He took a deep breath. I need to show you something. Only you, sir." He opened his coat pocket and took out a small USB drive. It seemed light, harmless, but when a man hesitates so long to touch something, you know it carries weight. We returned to the warehouse, my refuge, now tainted by suspicion. The sun streamed in through the small window, illuminating particles of dust that danced in the air like memories that refused to die. I plugged the USB drive into the old computer I used to record my repairs. The screen flickered, and then the folders appeared. Audio 1, Audio 2, internal evidence. I didn't want to hear it, but I needed to. The pressure started when he explained what it was. "Your son, Ethan, he hired us saying that you were unstable, that you had episodes, that you had secret accounts and could run away." Each word hurt like ripping a rusty nail from the skin. He asked us to find anything that would prove you were lying about your finances. I asked, fearing the answer. "And did you find it?" The investigator swallowed hard. "Initially, no, nothing. You have a clean, simple, transparent life. Break." But Ethan insisted. He said that you were hiding it well, that there must be something. I leaned against the counter. Breathing was heavy. And then came the violation, the inevitable act of injustice. The investigator opened the first audio file. "Ira Ethan, if you don't find anything, you can make it up. I'll pay double. I just need my father to sign these papers and he won't cooperate without pressure." My heart was torn apart. He tore it up as if he were listening to my son admit that he never saw me as a father, only as an obstacle. I opened the second audio file. Ethan again. "I can forge his signature. I've done it before. I just need you to confirm that he's behaving suspiciously. A formal visit from the police should be enough. I'll take care of the rest." I closed my eyes. His voice echoed like a lost child calling for help. But it wasn't a child. He was a man who had decided to destroy me in order to fix his own life. The investigator placed his hand on my shoulder. "I can't continue with this, Mr. Miller. I was hired to find the truth, not to construct a lie." And the authority quietly entered the story when he said he would speak to the police on his own. They need to know that their son tried to manipulate the investigation. "I could also be charged if I hide this," I nodded. "Because there was nothing else I could do. Not even for me. Not dust, Ethan." The final confrontation that afternoon took place without any shouting. No tears, just a silence that weighed like lead. I placed my hand on the trunk of the old tree, the same tree where Ethan had once climbed, crying because he was afraid to sleep alone. The same tree where he hugged me for the first time after his mother left home. And I asked, my voice choked with grief, "At what point did my son decide that I was the enemy?" The investigator didn't know the answer. He simply lowered his head. When he left, a single yellow leaf fell from the tree, slowly, turning no R, until it lands at my feet. I picked up the sheet. It was fragile, brittle, like a fragment of something that was once alive, and now only exists as a memory. I sat on the shed step and stayed there, holding that sheet of paper for too long, thinking about the boy who had already climbed that tree, thinking about the man who was now trying to tear down everything we had built. The pocket watch in my pocket was ticking irregularly, as if it were following my breathing, as if to say that, even broken, it was still trying to function, like me. The courtroom always seemed to me a distant place, reserved for people who were either too rich or too problematic. I never imagined that one day I would be there, not as a witness, not as a guest, but as the target from a story created by my own son. The shiny floor reflected my tired face in distorted shadows. The walls were high, white, and far too impersonal, as if they wanted to erase any trace of humanity before the trial. The air smelled of old paper and poorly regulated air conditioning, and each step echoed so loudly that it seemed like an accusation in itself. Before I continue, subscribe and tell me what time it is where you are right now. When I walked in, I didn't see Ethan right away, but I felt his presence even before I lifted my head. It was as if that tense silence had been molded around him. And then I saw him, seated in the front row, dark suit, stiff shoulders, jaw clenched. It wasn't my son. It was something else. A stranger dressed as the boy I taught to ride a bike. My eyes fell on the pocket watch hidden in my jacket. My talisman. My reminder. The ticking was so faint that I could barely feel the vibrations, but it was there, as if to say, hold on tight. Before the judge entered, my mind wandered, as it always did lately, to a piece of the past that still hurt less than the present. Ethan was only 6 years old when he fell off his bicycle on the street above. It was a nasty fall. Knee split open, hands scraped, tears cutting through the air like a knife. I ran to him, knelt on the hot asphalt, and he squeezed my hand so hard that my fingers were numb for hours. He trusted me with his whole body, with all his fear. And now, years later, he wouldn't even squint at me. The judge entered. The room rose to its feet. My heart too, but only to fall again. Ethan's lawyer was the first to speak. She walked to the center with light, almost elegant steps, like someone who already knows they are going to win. Your Excellency, we are here because Mr. Miller, he pointed at me, as if I were an object on display, manipulated financial documents, concealed assets, and harmed his son Ethan Rogers' business, causing him irreparable damage. I felt the weight of each word hit my chest, but I remained motionless. I learned this in life. When the world tries to tear you apart, you learn to breathe slowly. And the seemingly innocent request came from his lawyer. If you wish to end this now, we can make a deal. Just take responsibility and spare your son further suffering. To take the blame for something that he did. My body trembled inside, but on the outside I seemed made of stone. Old age has this advantage. Pain learns to hide itself. The pressure came soon after, as expected. Think about the well-being of the family. Think about his future. Think about the emotional impact this will have. A father sometimes needs to sacrifice. Sacrifice. The word hung in the air, laden with poison. I've already sacrificed my entire life, and it was never enough. My lawyer asked to speak. Good man. Serious, discreet, firm. He simply said, Your Excellency, we would like to present additional evidence. And then the room went cold. The violation, the climax, came when Ethan witnessed it. He walked to the center of the room, but not like a son, like an accuser. He said I've always been a control freak. He said I was preventing him from growing. He said I was becoming disconnected from reality. I heard everything, without interrupting. Each sentence tore a piece away from me. But I let him finish, because that's how I raised Ethan. I let him talk even when he wasn't saying anything. The judge frowned. Do you have material evidence to support these allegations? Ethan hesitated, just for a second. But I saw it. I always see it. A authority. The decisive moment came when my lawyer placed the investigator's flash drive on the table. The recordings obtained show a clear intention to manipulate the police investigation and create falsehoods to incriminate his own father. The room has changed. The atmosphere changed. Even the sound changed. The judge listened. Everyone heard. Ethan's voice came through the speakers in the room, raw, unmasked. If you can't find anything, make something up. He needs to sign. He can't interfere with my business. And then, I can forge his signature. I've done it before. I closed my eyes, not by me, but for him, for whom he could have been, for whom he chose not to be. When the recording ended, the room was in absolute silence, the kind of silence that breaks people. The judge cleared her throat, handed back the flash drive and said, Mr. Ethan, the court will take this very seriously. My son turned pale, white as chalk, unable to speak. The final confrontation came when he turned, for the first time that day, to look at me. His eyes were trembling, not out of anger, but out of fear. I felt the urge to hug him, to do what I did on the hot asphalt so many years ago, to hold his hand, but I didn't. I simply asked, in the weakest voice I've ever heard myself speak, everything I taught you has turned into this? He didn't answer. Her mouth opened, but no words came out, and perhaps that hurt more than any accusation. When I left the courthouse, the sky was cloudy, that grayish hue that seems to announce rain without the courage to fall. The cold wind cut my face, carrying with it the distant scent of eucalyptus. I reached into my pocket and touched my watch. Tick, and so on. Weak, stubborn, tired, like me. I lifted my face to the sky and took a deep breath. Life goes on, it always goes on, but sometimes it drags along what has left. And at that moment I knew. The worst thing wasn't my son trying to blame me. It was realizing that at some point along the way, he stopped seeing me as a father, and I didn't realize it. My son didn't come home that day. Not even in the next one. Not even in the other one. His silence was so heavy it seemed to fill every room in the house. the kitchen, the narrow hallway, even the shed where I kept memories he pretended not to remember. The days passed slowly, with that kind of melancholy that clings to the walls. The wind rattled the tin cans hanging on the terrace, making a metallic sound that always served to scare away birds. But now he seemed to be trying to ward off the truth itself. Before I continue, subscribe and tell me what time it is where you are right now. I spent most of my time sitting there in the old chair on the terrace, looking at the empty street. The tin cans swayed from side to side as if asking, where did it all go wrong? The smell of recent rain still lingered in the air. Those mornings smelled exactly like the day 9-year-old Ethan asked me to help him set up a mini garden in the backyard. He said he wanted to see life being born. And now, he was determined to kill everything that still stood between us. The news of his downfall came in a strange way. Not through a phone call, not through a message, but from outsiders. First, the neighbor from the street above commented that Ethan's business partners had drifted apart. Then the bank manager walked past the gate and said discreetly, I'm sorry to hear what happened to your son. His lines of credit have been suspended. And then the final confirmation came from the local news. Not by name, but with enough details for me to recognize him. Financial investigations, suspicious documentation, failure to prove the origin of funds. I, who never wanted to see my son destroyed, now watched everything from afar, unable to do anything, perhaps without having to do anything. The innocent request came that afternoon when my phone rang. She was my ex-wife, a voice I hadn't heard in months, maybe years. Can you talk to him? She asked, holding her breath. He needs you. The word needs hurt, because when he really needed me years ago, I was there. But now he only contacted me when everything was falling apart. Before I could answer, she added, he thinks you ruined his life. I closed my eyes. The wind shook the tin cans above me, as if laughing at the irony. Yep, the pressure came minutes later, when she insisted. He said you should have covered it up to protect him. That's what a father does. Protect it. To cover up, to assume, sacrifice. Always the same cycle, always the same wound. I took a deep breath and simply said, I can't teach you to lie. Not now, not ever. There was silence on the other end. A silence I knew well. It was the silence of someone who places the blame for years on a single name. Mine. Iskat the breach. The final explosions came when I tried to speak to Ethan in person. I found him on the street in front of his mother's house. He was thin, tired, and had an unkempt beard. He looked broken, but still arrogant. A combination that was painful to look at. Son, can we talk? I asked. He didn't even let me finish. You were never a real father, he shouted loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. It's always been a problem. It's always messed everything up. The words tore through the air like shattering glass. I took a step back. Not because of the volume, because of its meaning. He continued. If you had helped me, none of this would have happened. It's your fault. My fault. Always mine. The word he used as a weapon ever since he discovered that the world doesn't turn the way he wants it to. A lesser authority. The incident occurred when one of the neighbors, concerned by the screams, called the police. The agents arrived quickly. 2 men in uniform trying to understand what was happening. Mr. Ethan, you seem agitated. We're going to need you to calm down. I am calm, he shouted. But it wasn't. Not even on the inside. Not even from the outside. The police officers asked him to pull over, try to breathe and give it some time. He refused. He started walking in circles, blaming everything. To blame everyone. To blame Emmy. Always. Then one of them approached slowly and said, Sir, you need to come with us to cool off. It's not prison, it's just to calm down. I saw in his eyes, my son's, a mixture of shock and defeat. And then he looked at me. A gaze laden with everything he never knew how to express without turning into pain. And before being taken away, he even managed to spit, You destroyed my life. I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. But I didn't answer. Because if I opened my mouth at that moment, perhaps my voice wouldn't come out. After they left, I slowly returned to the terrace. The hanging cans had been knocked down by the strong wind during the commotion. And there they were, scattered on the ground, crumpled, making a faint noise whenever the wind passed. I knelt down and began to hang them up again one by one, like someone trying to rebuild something that time insists on destroying. The sound returned, metallic, weak, sad. It was almost a plea for forgiveness, or a reminder that some noises never stop. When I finished, I stood there watching them sway, and for a moment I wondered if it was all still worth it. The pocket watch on my chest felt heavier than ever. Tick and so on. Weak, irregular. But I'm alive, stubbornly alive. Like me, like pain, like love that endures, even when no one asks for it anymore. A week after the incident with the police, the house was so quiet that I could hear the irregular ticking of the pocket watch even when I left it on the other side of the room. That faltering sound seemed to accompany my breathing, a reminder that some things continue even when they shouldn't. It was the early hours of the morning when I finally fell asleep in the living room armchair, but the rest was short-lived. At 6 a.m. I heard 3 faint knocks on the door. There was no rush. It wasn't anger. It seemed like a request. I opened the door slowly, and there was Ethan, skinny, deep-set eyes. The face that once lit up my life now seemed to have aged 10 years in just a few days. He held his hands together as if trying to stop them from trembling. "Dad, can I come in?" "Before I continue, subscribe and tell me what time it is where you are right now." I left the door open. He entered slowly, taking small steps, as if fearing that the house might collapse at any moment. The room was bathed in the soft light of dawn. The smell of old wood, burnt coffee, and dust hung in the air, the perfect combination of the place where my whole life had unfolded. I sat down in the armchair. He stood up. There was such a profound silence between us that it felt like a third character in the room. I immediately remembered an old memory, perhaps the most painful one now. Ethan was only 5 years old when he woke up during a storm, terrified by the thunder rattling against the window. He ran into my room, jumped on the bed, and snuggled into my chest. I rocked him for hours, repeating the same phrase: "As long as I'm here, nothing will hurt you." Seeing that boy there, now transformed into a broken adult, it was like seeing 2 versions of him superimposed, the one who ran into my arms and the one who now fled from them at all costs. Asom, his seemingly innocent request came quietly. "Dad, I need to talk to you." I didn't answer. I only pointed to the seat in front. He sat down slowly. The wood creaked, almost crying, and then he let out all the air at once. I lost everything. There was no accusation in his voice. There was no anger, just empty. My name, my career, my partners. Nobody wants to talk to me. He rubbed his hands over his face, and I don't know what to do. Or for a very brief moment, I felt the urge to reach out my hand, to do what a father does, to be repaired. But I learned that love cannot exist where lies reside. The pressure came soon after. "Dad, you need to help me." He leaned forward, his eyes red, his voice breaking. "If you take some of the blame, just a little, I can reverse this. I just need you to publicly say that you were part of the decisions. That way they'll ease up on me." I closed my eyes. The pain came, but it was an old pain, repeated, like a loop I already knew well. Take responsibility for him. Protect him. Save him. It's always me. "Son," I murmured, "I can't confess to a crime I didn't commit." He swallowed hard. "But you can prevent me from being destroyed." It wasn't a request. It was an ultimatum disguised as a plea. Cesar, the final violation, the definitive blow, came when he said the phrase that killed me without screaming. "Dad, if you truly love me, do this for me." There I understood everything. For him, love was a bargaining chip, unilateral sacrifice, a contract where I always lost. The authority figure was sitting there in the room as well. My lawyer, who had come by early to review some documents with me and was in the hallway, listening to every word. He entered the room at that moment, confident, with the technical gaze of someone who knows where that path ends. "Ethan," he said, calm but firm, "what you're asking your father to do is a crime. You've already committed forgery, fraud, and manipulation of investigations. If he takes the blame for you now, you'll both fall." Ethan's expression turned into a mixture of despair and contained fury. "So you two chose to abandon me?" I stood up slowly, my knees complaining, my age speaking loudly, and walked over to him. I could smell him, the same smell I smelled when I held him in my arms for the first time, the smell of fear and of life beginning, but also the smell of bad choices. "Son," I whispered, "if I take over, it's over. And if you take over, you start over." He stared at me for several long seconds, and then without a word, he stood up and went to the door. It opened. He didn't look back. It went out. And this time, there was no screaming. There were no charges. There was no hatred. Only the sound of the door closing and the silence that remained in his place. The house seemed emptier than ever. I sat down again in the living room armchair. I took the pocket watch from my chest. I opened it slowly, and at that exact moment, the ticking stopped. I stopped too. I stared at the stationary mechanism as if I could hear my father telling me something I'd always ignored. Some things break slowly, others break all at once, but everything that breaks leaves an echo. The morning light hit the worn metal of the clock, creating a crooked reflection on the wall, a reflection that looked like me, with my life, with my son. Life goes on, and it always goes on, but never in the same way. And sometimes, a child's silence weighs more than any accusation.